world. The entire world is watching us right now.
Yeah,
And
forget that Republican convention. They're going to watch us.
yes, and they're listening at the same time too. Yes, this is Context. This is the show where the past meets the present, where we look at current events through the lens of historical context, hence the name Context. And we have a lot to talk about, but it's more broad this week. It's more general trends going on. So before we get into that, let's introduce ourselves. I am Matt Beat, famously known as Mr. Beat on YouTube, Mr. Beat Social Studies channel, and joined by
Robert Marshall of Reading Through History.
All right, and you can find him on YouTube as well, Reading Through History, or is it readingthroughhistory.com, right?
Yes.
Readingthroughhistory.com.
Readingthroughhistory.com. It's a legit website.
Not .org or not .net.
Oh, yeah, we're at .com.
All right. So, and if you want to review us on Stitcher and iTunes, please do that and be honest with it. Unless you have something bad to say, then lie and say we're a good show. So, oh, and if you want to reach us, the email is contextpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, let's just dive right in, as they say. Well, it's been 2 weeks or a little over 2 weeks since we spoke last, and the big news has been really two things. And I'm going to put something on the screen here because it kind of sums up everything really well as far as what we're going to be talking about. Because also going on right now is the RNC, which you mentioned. Let's see if I can find the story. I got a million windows open up right now. Here it is. Okay, so we've got basically police brutality that has now turned into cop killings. And we've got more and more terrorism, it seems like. Okay. Well, I'll just do the entire screen. And that looks weird for a second, but there we go. Can you see that?
I can, but I don't. When I watch the playbacks, I don't think the viewers have been able to see them.
I think they have. Last week, they or 2 weeks ago, they could see it, I think. But yeah, so this headline says Republican convention kicks off amid tensions of terrorism, cop killings. And it kind of sums up what we're going to be talking about overall with this episode. I think the general theme is there seems to be a lot of chaos, instability, not just in the United States. Well, I would actually argue especially in Europe and just around the world. It seems like there's one thing after another in the news, and it seems to be picking up, and it seems like people are more and more in fear. And I don't know, have you noticed the same thing?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so it's not just me, and we were talking about this before the show. It's I wanted to kind of bring some context to this, but first we probably should look at specific incidents. Just a brief overview here. We had in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there was somebody who was killed by an officer, and it appeared like this person, wasn't doing anything wrong.
Or about 50 things wrong.
And then, okay, well, hold off on that. Then literally like a day later or something like that, in Minneapolis, there was or not Minneapolis, St. Paul, like a suburb of St. Paul, there was another one. And this one was all caught in film. And this guy, the guy in St. Paul, apparently didn't have any record at all. It was just, apparently he was like an upstanding citizen.
Wasn't he the one with 55 tickets or something, encounters with cops?
I thought that was the Baton Rouge. I don't know. It
He
doesn't.
was the one that had been pulled over so many times.
I don't think that was St. Paul. I mean, unless I'm mixing it up. But the point is that both of these individuals were killed. Both of them were African American, and everybody saw it very visual. And then this is obviously something that this is not new. These incidents have been happening more publicly the past 2 or 3 years, and it seems like more frequently it comes up. And not only that, we had some terrorist activities as well. In Nice, France, we had a guy who just drove over as many people as he could and jumped out of his car and said, what is it? I don't know.
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, yeah. And basically did it kind of showing he was in the name of Islam. And then we also had, it's so hard to keep track of all these, you know?
I know. That's why you're sit there and have to think, am I mixing this stuff up in my head or what?
Yeah, we had, well, obviously we have issues in Turkey. We have, we're back on screen now, right? Yeah. So in Turkey, there was an attempted coup over the president of Turkey, who he is sympathetic to ISIS. You could say his son is definitely, and it seems like there's a growing amount of radical viewpoints in Turkey, and the military tried to stage a coup to get the president out there. It didn't work. It was not successful. And now there's backlash on the people who tried to stir up trouble. The terrorist attack that I'm forgetting. This, do you remember the other one?
Talking about another one?
Oh, there's just so many.
There was an airport. There was one at the airport in Istanbul not too long ago.
Okay.
That's just in our theater. I mean, if you get into Nigeria and Iraq, and it's almost a daily basis.
Kazakhstan.
You could pull up the terrorism list. I've always wanted to talk about that on the show. Just it's like a Wikipedia page, but it keeps track of all the terrorism, like day by day. It's frightening.
Oh yeah. Now the one I was thinking of was Kazakhstan. This happened today. And did you know about this one?
This one I don't believe I've heard of.
I'll just read the first couple paragraphs verbatim here then. Kazakhstan declared a terrorism alert in Almaty, the country's financial center, after 5 people, including 3 policemen, were killed during attacks by militants. The officers died during gun battles with a man who had attacked a district police building in the city on Monday, the Interior Ministry said in a statement. 2 policemen were also wounded, and the militant shot a civilian dead when he tried to steal his car. It said the attacker was arrested, and police later detained a suspected accomplice, the ministry's press service said. This is not a very well-written article.
No, I was going to say, it sounds like the civilian was trying to steal the car from the terrorists. Like, no. That can't be right.
No. Bloomberg, I don't know. What can you do? But that's... that
sounds more like an average day in America.
Yeah, that wasn't actually
a terrorist attack.
You know, and that's another thing. We mentioned this last episode. What do you call terrorists? Like, you could say that the cop killings that followed the police brutalities. I would say that's terrorism. I mean,
there's a very substantial percentage of the American population that considers what happens to the victims of the encounters with police, the police shooting them is terrorism.
Well, and I think the police are terrorized right now because they're afraid that they're going to be targeted because of their uniform.
Their jobs and neighborhoods that they have to work in. Everyone there could be terrorized to go to work,
Yeah, but you could also make the argument that the people that live in these poor neighborhoods where police brutality has been the norm, you could say that they're terrorized as well. They would call the cops terrorists. People in the Black Lives Matter movement I would assume many would argue that they are the terrorists. So it's a word that's political, that's it's kind of used to kind of make one person feel superior or act in a way that gives them authority over another person or group. I mean, it's one of those words that I'm going to make a video about this. I am honestly, I get really frustrated when I hear when I turn on the news and I hear terrorists. So I feel like this word has just been warped like no other. It's misused. And I think it's. I mean, if you look at the true definition of what terror or terrorism is, it's not what it is really has become today. I mean, it's all over the place. It seems like anybody can just use that word to describe any attack. But I digress a little bit there. The fact is, what we have not mentioned, there was in Dallas, there were several. How many police officers killed in Dallas?
It was over. I know it was over a dozen, and 5 were killed.
A dozen wounded, 5 killed, and then we had 3 in Baton Rouge that were killed a couple days ago. So we're seeing backlash now. It seems like the frustration with the system, with the police not reforming to address these issues, has now reached a point where there are people who are turning to violence to try to send a message. That's how extreme that has gotten. And I feel like, obviously I'm gonna bring up the Black Lives Matter their homepage here. Can you see that? Black Lives Matter.
Yep. In yellow.
I think it's good to bring this up again, because for the most part, these are peaceful protests. And I think there's a few people now that have just kind of become radicalized, I think, within this movement. I mean, I don't know if many would argue that they're not associated with this movement at all. But you saw the same thing in the 60s. You saw in the early days of the civil rights movement, you saw peaceful protests modeled after Gandhi. You had Martin Luther King Jr., and then you had Malcolm X. You had more radical elements later on of Black Power. For the most part, though, the Black Panthers were not a violent organization. They were not. That is a big fallacy I'm seeing online right now. But there were some who were radicalized and they became violent. But the fact is, they're not seeing the changes they want. That there's these police organizations in every city around this entire country overwhelmingly have not reformed much at all. They've given lip service. Up until very recently, they haven't even admitted a mistake. But recently, at least now, they're trying to improve their image by saying, yeah, we've made some mistakes here. We're making a few changes. But I feel like some people are becoming impatient, just like they were impatient in the 60s, But again, Black Lives Matter, it started in 2012, 4 years ago. It's grown. I think their movement has gotten so big because the police brutality, the brutalities are becoming more and more visible. They've always been there. But now that they're more visible than ever, I think the movement has really gained a lot of momentum. Unfortunately, we're seeing now some cop killings, and this is when I first heard that what happened in Dallas, it's just sad that people have really, they felt the need to stoop that low to, I guess, get their message across. So I've talked a lot here. What do you think about all this?
Well, what are the police supposed to do? What kind of reforms are we talking about? Like not going into the black neighborhoods at all? It's like Eric Garner and Tamir Rice. Those are the two to me that leave questions in my mind. Every other one of these encounters, it's all the media just swarming in for attention. You really see it in election years too. 2012 was an election year, and that's when this entire Black Lives movement started. And you see it again here, 2016, and it's just swelling up immensely. And the entire movement was founded on a fabrication. That entire account of what happened in Ferguson was fake. The entire thing. And the gentle giant, he's just walking down the street with his cigarillos. And you get into the courtroom And testimony, many of it from African Americans, said, no, that's not what happened. You know, he wasn't shot in the back execution style on his knees with his hands up in the air saying, hands up, don't shoot. He assaulted the officer, reached in, tried to grab the guy's gun. You know, the gun went off in the cop car when they were wrestling for it in power. You know, the power struggle. You know, he turns to run away and then stops and turns and runs back at the officer. You know, an assault was taking place, and that's when he shot the guy. And we're already starting to hear the truth of what really happened in these last two encounters, but no one cares, and the media will not say it. And there's cops shot on a daily basis. It's just now, yeah, this new style of calling in something and then ambushing them. Yeah, this is an entirely new level. But my question is, what are the cops supposed to do?
Well, you brought up Tamir Rice, and what was the other victim?
Unless I'm mistaken, that's the kid that was with the pellet gun or the BB gun in the park. Yeah, in Cleveland. Yeah. And you see that video. I mean, the cop, it rolls right up, and they shoot the kid almost instantly.
Yeah.
Eric Gardner was the other one. Where he was
the guy who was selling cigarettes in the street.
Yeah,
he was this.
I mean, that one. And there was the one in South Carolina where the guy was running away and the cop shot him. So there are real cases we could be talking about. My question is, why are they not the ones we're hearing about? Why
is it about these?
Why is it the stuff? But the whole Black Lives Matter was from the deal in Ferguson. Michael Brown.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Ferguson. It was. Let me go back here.
Like, why is that the one that we hear about?
It was Zimmerman.
That's where the whole
George
Zimmerman. That's not even a cop.
No,
that's not even a cop.
Yeah, you're right. George Zimmerman and what happened in Ferguson, I forgot his name, but yeah, those are two bad examples of police brutality because clearly the supposed victims in both of those cases were not really victims so much at all, right? But like you mentioned, Tamir Rice, let's focus on that, because when I first saw the video of that, I mean, my blood boiled. I mean, I was in shock and I was angry. I mean, this is the stuff that should be going viral and the people should be in the streets about this. I mean,
yeah, because the more I learn about these last two, I mean, it's a tragedy that the guys are dead, but just cooperate with the police. But in both cases, it seems like, man, they were really, you know, they're usually right on the verge of getting in some serious trouble. And they don't want to, and they haven't changed their behavior patterns at all. I mean, the rap sheets are just ridiculous.
Well, let's see. So Philando Castile was the guy in Minnesota. That's the guy you said had 52.
Well, unless I'm mistaken, he had been pulled over many, many times, and there was marijuana in the car, and he matched the description of an armed robbery. I'm not saying he did. That's why I'm saying you can't really have conversations about these cases until it's been through the court system.
Right.
First, it was the fiance, and we had a busted taillight. No, he didn't have a busted taillight. No, she's not his fiance. I mean, they're both cases of, this is the story that gets to the public first. With the whole Michael Brown thing, I mean, the entire story was fake, was a farce.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, she just, right after he got shot, so we have no context of what happened before then. She's like, this is my fiance, busted taillight. No, we didn't have a busted taillight. There's already memes all over the internet. Oh, walking down the middle of the street, gets shot. No, that's not what happened. It was a strong armed robbery. It was a guy not listening, trying to. It's all fake. That's what I'm saying. And
it's not. No.
Narrative.
Don't say it's all fake. That's a dangerous.
What they're saying is their narrative is hands up, don't shoot. That's fake.
Oh, okay.
I cannot have any sympathy for Michael Brown. None.
All right.
At all.
No, that's completely fair. I think a lot of people would agree with you. Even within the Black Lives Matter movement, I think
pulled him over and said, you got a busted tail light. That's what they tell you. You do not have a busted tail. You match the description of a robbery. They don't want to raise suspicion. She's like, I don't wear busted tail. So that's the narrative that's out there. That's like the police can't say a word because there's an investigation going on. And then the President of the United States of America marches out there and takes what the media say and just like puts a spotlight on it. It's like he's the chief executive. It's his responsibility to try and control this, and he doesn't. He just fans the flames.
Well,
That's
yeah, I think
going on
the media certainly fans the flames.
Yeah,
that's really what drives a lot of
this. An election year when they're trying to get votes for the Democrats, it's like they see the Black America as their little lapdog. Oh, we can control you. Oh, we need our protection and such. It's frankly disgusting.
All right, you made valid points, I think. But let's go back to Tamir Rice. Okay, let's go back to this kid getting shot for no reason. I mean, because they think he has a gun.
It's like a matter of seconds.
A toy.
Well, technically, unless I'm mistaken, it was a pellet or BB gun.
No, I do not think that's a BB gun.
Now, if you can see what it was, but yeah, that one but you got to remember the neighborhoods these cops work in, the stuff they deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I could have sworn it was a toy gun.
Well, technically, I mean, to me, my BB gun was a toy. So if you can find out exactly, not that it makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, that's again. I think we're losing focus here. I think.
Yeah, unless I'm mistaken, he's walking around in a park, like you and I did when we were kids, like, oh yeah, chasing the bad guys or cowboys and Indians or whatever. They get a call that there's a guy walking around with a gun. In effect, it's the same call that happened in Baton Rouge. Oh, there's a guy walking around with a gun. Mm-hmm. So that's the call they get. So a lot of these kids, I mean, you've taught kids that are way bigger than their age and stuff like that. It can look pretty intimidating. So they're in Cleveland, which is a pretty high crime area, pretty dangerous neighborhood. You got to think, this is where the training is. This is where there's a point where they're like, you don't know what these cops have been through, what they've seen, how bad their day's been and all this stuff. And they come rolling up in there and, they react. So that's the type of gun that he had. And he had removed the cap off the end, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Not that in 3 seconds you could make that assessment anyway. So they already had to have weapons drawn and stuff because the cop car had barely stopped.
All right. Yeah. I don't want to get too much into specifics anyway, but as far as incidents, but I mean, do you concur that there is a significant issue with the way that our police seems to target minorities?
Well, I think they're targeting the crime areas is what it is. What's getting lost here is America's obsession with race.
Well, okay, but don't go off there yet. Let's just stay focused on, because I want to talk about race here in a little bit. But I mean,
because they don't target them. I mean, if you look at the statistics, you actually put the number of cops shot by black men every year to the number of black men killed by cops.
About the same as whites, right? I saw some article.
What's the same as whites?
Oh, you said the percentage of shooting whites is the same as blacks. I saw some article about that the other day. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying the cops killed by black criminals. And
oh,
so I mean, the gist of it is this is happening in the crime areas.
When you say
poor minority areas. Now the cops are there to protect the community.
But you're saying, okay, when you're saying, I just want clarification here. You say the cops are killed by black criminals. What do you mean black criminals?
Saying the number where they're in contact with the criminal population and the criminal shoots and kills an officer.
So you're talking about like somebody resisting arrest
It
Like,
happens. Oh, I'm just, yeah, or, now the new thing's just let's go up to them while they're pumping gas and shoot them in the back of the head. I mean, these are the neighborhoods these cops are working at.
okay, why are these neighborhoods the way they are, though?
Because they're high crime areas.
Why are they high crime areas?
Because the people who live in them commit a lot of crime.
But why do they commit a lot of crime? These people is what I'm saying. Like,
Oh, that's the conversation America does not want to have. I mean, I saw an exchange on CNN the other day, and a white person cannot say it. But I saw an encounter as a clip on CNN the other day. You had a former New York City police detective. He had the stats.
oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
He
That
was
guy.
like,
No,
he
that
was
guy
like-
was a jerk. Like,
he
and
did. He's
doesn't
not
know
the
what
one
he's
that said
talking
it. It was
about.
the little black guy next to him that said it. And plus, hey, look up the definition of that word. Do you remember what the word was?
No, what were you
Prone.
talking about?
Look up the definition of the word prone and put it on the screen. Look up the
Prone?
definition. Prone. P-R-O-N. Are they prone to crime? Look up the definition and put it on screen.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're ready for this, America.
America. Let's see.
Look up the definition of the word prone.
Okay, can you see it?
It's small.
Likely to. Oh, well, let me zoom in here. Likely to or liable to suffer from, do, or experience something typical, something regrettable, or unwelcome.
Oh man, would you say the African American community is liable to suffer from or experience something, typically something regrettable or unwelcome to crime?
Yeah,
Is the black community likely to suffer from crime?
they are vulnerable. They are, and by this definition, they are prone.
Yes.
Is that why he got a bunch of flack?
He wasn't even really the one that said it.
What I didn't like about what he was saying.
Arguing with him.
Well, what I didn't like what he was saying was, if I remember correctly, this guy basically made it seem like
There it was.
There was
It
no
right
problem.
there.
there was no problem. It's like he was saying, like, I mean, he discounted the fact that blacks are disproportionately in prison much more. Like, he thought that
It
was
matches
something.
the crime statistics.
Yeah, but that old narrative is old. I mean, it's.
But, I mean, then what do you do? Not arrest criminals, not incarcerate, not imprison them. I mean, that's the system we have.
But the majority of
We
police
live in a
officers are.
country where 6% of the population, that's young, it's black males between the age of 15 and 40, commit over 50% of the murders. Are we not supposed to imprison them? We're not supposed to arrest them? You've seen the Ferguson effect in Chicago. It's where the cops don't want to go in there and do their jobs anymore.
Yeah, you're talking about gangs, right? Is that what you're
That's
talking about?
the result.
Yeah,
Because
and
after the Ferguson effect, it's like, well, they're pulling back and not patrolling these neighborhoods as aggressively, and this is the result. I mean, this is Obama's America.
no, there's evidence that when they pull back from neighborhoods, actually things get better.
No, they don't.
And some neighborhoods. Oh yeah, New York.
In inner cities in the last 4 years.
No, I'm talking
It's
about New York.
skyrocketing.
In New York, they did something like that. The police pulled back, and crime actually went down. I don't know if you heard about that.
I mean, if you're talking about when Rudy Giuliani was, because that's when crime went down, is whenever a Republican was running the city.
Well, yeah, they had a virtual police state. But no, this was more recent. I gotta find that article and send it to you. But
No,
I mean,
go
back
look
to
up
what
the
I was
crimes in New York City by race. You
Right,
can go
but,
to that.
okay.
It's
but
insane.
Robert, like, you need to be careful what you're saying here because
No, that's the
you came
problem.
with
Is
a
no
broad
one can have
brush.
an honest conversation about this. I mean, that's why
That's what
all
we're
of this
doing.
is going on.
That's what we're doing.
But
But
then you're immediately, oh, you got to be careful what you say. You can't say this, can't say that. Get back in your pen. We'll pretend like the country's getting better.
no, it's the police are overwhelmingly white, no matter where you're at. Okay, and they are
Look at
overwhelmingly.
these two
Listen,
most
let me
recent
finish.
shootings. Unless I'm mistaken, one of them was Asian and the other one was Hispanic.
So, no,
Yet they're
anecdotes
still,
are not.
it's white racism.
No, okay, so we have every single human being has prejudice. Every single human being, yourself included, right? So once we admit that, then we admit that all police officers have prejudice. All police officers, if you look at the population of police officers, overwhelmingly
There's no one that
are
could
white.
control those neighborhoods and not
are
have.
white. Let me finish.
I know it's there.
They are white. And so we have ultimately profiling going on. Well, if you're saying, like you said, we have a pretty high percentage of young black men who are in prison already, mostly for gang violence, which is mostly tied to the drug war, which goes back to Nixon, which some people say pretty shady stuff about what he wanted as far as, trying to, his vision for society is linked up with the drug war and minorities. But they have this vision already because clearly you look at the prisons, it's mostly black men or minorities. And so when they're going out on the streets, they're going to automatically assume somebody of color is more likely to commit a crime than somebody who has lighter skin. The odds are already stacked against you. You have to admit that these people are profiled.
So you're suggesting they stop going into these neighborhoods.
If a police officer pulls over somebody who is black, they are white, which again most of them are, they are going to react differently than if this person was white. Can you agree with that?
So the Homeland Security, what should they do when they're trying to find terrorism?
They profile too. They do this exact same thing.
Basically saying, well, this Sheikh Makhbul Muhammad Bahala, whose family is connected to terrorism in Tunisia, and Matt B in Kansas, we shouldn't profile. They should pay just as much attention to you or pull you over too.
I don't think they should profile personally. I think that's wrong to assume based on someone's religion or based on their skin color that they are a criminal. I think that's
so we would
dangerous.
have to have like 6 or 7 times as many police as we do, and then we would have more white police officers, right?
No, I think
they only got so many resources, and if this is a high murder, drug, crime area, I mean, and they go in there, most of the people they pull over are going to be black, correct? Because it's a black neighborhood.
Right, but
what do they do? What are they supposed to do? I mean, we're literally setting this up to fail. And it's African Americans in these communities that are suffering. That's what is totally glossed over by Black Lives Matter. I mean, what's going on in Chicago is a disgrace. I mean, daily stories. And they won't focus on it. We're talking it can be 50 or 60 people murdered in a weekend.
But the difference is these are
2 things. And like I said, under very questionable circumstances, the more information that's coming out about what was actually going on, you're just sitting there shaking your head, thinking, my gosh, it's looking more and more like this guy, or the car at least, but he matched the description. I mean, the car even matched from the robbery.
Yeah, but the difference
he said, I'm reaching for my wallet, but that's not on the tape. You can see this with every single one of these instances. Like I said, except the ones, ironically, that they're not talking about.
They do talk about those. They talk about Tamir Rice.
And you barely hear they'll throw it in like, oh, let's throw his name in, let's name drop, and then get on to Freddie Gray. And all 4 of those officers have been acquitted of wrongdoing.
Oh, yeah, that's horrible. But I mean, when you say that what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in Chicago is, of course they did something wrong.
It's a war zone.
It is a war zone, yeah. So let's talk about that. Like the gang warfare that's going on, that they're terrorizing the streets of certain neighborhoods in Chicago. The difference here, though, is they're all criminals. We all agree that these people are criminals. They're taking the law into their own hands. The reason why the Black Lives Matter doesn't focus on them as much, this is just my speculation here, is because
doesn't get votes.
A police officer is supposed to be like the top of the top, the best we have in our society to serve and protect. These people are supposed to be ready for any situation. They're supposed to be trained to handle any high pressure emergency out there. I mean, these are supposed to be our heroes, you know, like firefighters, like our military. They're supposed to be the ones who make us feel safe. And when you can't trust them, then who can you trust? That's the point of the Black Lives Matter
from the
movement.
government. The point of Black Lives Matter movement is George Soros gave millions of dollars and said go out there and cause trouble because it's an election year.
But that's part of it.
That's what it is. That's the problem. Is there are points to be made here. There are, but it's getting lost in this chaos. Nothing comes out of this. You know, it's right from the rules from radicals, I guess. You know, order from chaos, and order means more government control and power, more agencies, more bureaucracy. I mean, we're marching towards a federalized police.
Well, where
this ends up. And you can't trust the federal government more than you can your local, you know, city. And I mean, it's going to be a disaster.
Well, did you hear about this barbecue that there was like a Black Lives Matter protest that turned into a barbecue with cops?
Cops showed up and they were dancing together. Little charming clip.
Yeah. There's also there's something like this happened, I think somewhere in Texas. Let me pull it up on the screen. But there was this is the type of stuff that kind of this gets me, you know, this gets me excited here. My hometown, Wichita, Kansas. But yeah, there was a. It says this happened. Looks like yesterday. No, today. But you had it started out as a protest, and then you had some tensions in the beginning. This was in McAdams Park, and then they ended up bringing free food for everybody, and they had a barbecue. The police came out, and everybody just hung out and were partying. This is the type of stuff we need. We need police officers to actually not be acting like they're not on the same team, you know, like it's not us versus them. It's like we're all together. I'm just a normal person who my job is to be a police officer. I'm not, you know, I'm your neighbor just as much as I am a police officer. So I think the fact that you do I can't remember this guy's name, but he's on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he does a lot of activism now. He's a former police officer in Baltimore. But one of the big things he says is there's not enough community policing going on. There's not enough people that are actually going door to door and actually meeting the people that they're supposed to be protecting in the neighborhoods. You know, they'll stay in the car, you know.
A lot safer in the car, but you're not going to meet the people who aren't involved in crime in the neighborhood.
Right. You have to know your people in the neighborhood, build that relationship, build trust, and this isn't happening. And I think this is you asked earlier, what can they do? Well, this is the first thing they can do that's really easy. I mean, you need to the way you're talking is dangerous because you're making it seem like these people are inherently more dangerous than other human beings. They're not.
It's the dangerous neighborhoods.
But they're dangerous because of the drug war. It has nothing to do. The drug war.
I mean, we've had that conversation before with the drug wars, and that's a big part of it. I mean, the breakdown of the families and these
breakdown of the family. But that's related to the drug war too. I mean, the drug war caused the breakdown of the family. In my opinion,
white America is only 1 or 2 steps behind Black America in that regard with the breakdown of the family unit. I mean, it's getting to the same point. Yeah,
that's a valid point as well. I thought, I mean, you look at these. A big driving thing, of course, is poverty. I mean, poverty. I mean, yeah, there's white collar crime.
Trillions of dollars trying to fight and solve that, and it's not working. And again, it's government failure. You know, before we started these Great Society programs and stuff like that, it was the communities that helped the poor. So now it turned into a government check, and it's all about more government power. And it's getting to the point where the government can't really help most of the American population anymore. and pander to them. And you're seeing that with this current political cycle. I mean, you were seeing a lot of, I was just watching clips from the Republican, actually it was a live news feed. And the people who were coming out there and speaking, and of course this is scripted and hand selected, but I saw, Hispanics, I saw interracial families, I saw Black police officers, I saw, African Americans whose sons were killed by illegal immigrants after they'd been arrested dozens of times and weren't deported. I mean, you're seeing a big shift going on here, shift in attitude, shift in change, the way where Americans are going.
Yeah, there is a pushback to just the system in general. I think we've talked about this many times. Obviously, what a lot of people fail to see that Bernie Sanders supporters had this in common with Donald Trump supporters. I mean, I think it is unifying certain groups of people, but the division remains. And like you were kind of hinting at earlier, the division it's usually between it's over skin color. We're still at that level here in 2016 where skin color is constantly brought up. And I've seen some pretty good rants online the last few days about how it's just ridiculous how we even bring it up. We constantly are focusing on it.
Those are the key words, brought up.
Yeah, I mean, I made a video about this.
We're going to make this an issue even if it's not. It's just like Andrew, or I almost said Andrew Zimmern. Didn't he have a food TV show? Now, George Zimmerman, they turned him into a white man because it was handy. It fit the narrative when he wasn't.
Right.
You see with a lot of these police shootings.
You do, but that doesn't discount what really happens, And I think it's you make good points about how certain people have definitely manipulated others using this, like using BLM,
that's what's dangerous. I mean, we can literally see that's getting people killed.
Yeah, you're right. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes
it is.
Worse.
That was a phrase I was wanting to say earlier. It very much is, and the media is guilty. The president of the United States is guilty, and that's what they're doing.
I tried to send you this article earlier. I'm going to just show it to you now. But I thought it was really good. It came out last year, April of 2015. It's titled, I know it's CNN. CNN is pretty lame. We both agree on that, but they have a lot of content. So occasionally good stuff pops through. But I was reading this earlier today, and it's called We're Not Seeing More Police Shootings, Just More News Coverage. And so this kind of brings it to like, well, why is this a new phenomenon? And the article, I'll just read the first few lines for the listeners who are not watching.
See, we can call these guys by name.
Yeah.
I can't name the officers that have been shot. The officers have died in the line of duty. I can't name one of them.
They should be named too. So the article says, it feels like every week a name is added to the list. Another man, often black and unarmed, has died at the hands of police. And it has Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice. Michael Brown should not be on that list. Jason Harrison, Walter Scott, Eric Harris, Freddie Gray, to name a few. The headlines.
Eric Harris, wasn't he one of the Columbine shooters? Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold?
Probably a different Eric Harris here.
I would hope.
Tulsa here. But yeah, so it goes on to say, the headlines make it feel as if the country is experiencing an unprecedented wave of police violence, but experts say that isn't the case. We're just seeing more mainstream media coverage, and for a variety of reasons. So what you were saying, you and I were both saying earlier, the media is driving this, and it's almost making it worse because now when people know they're going to get the attention, they're going to get their agenda across in this way. It almost radicalizes some people, because of this, because it's just always there in the discussion. And I think I won't read the whole thing, obviously, but it goes on a little bit later to say that the fact that now we can film things on our phone very easily, that is pretty much why it has reached why the media grabbed onto it. They're like, well, this is all this free footage we can get. We can show the world. We can drive up our ratings because this is just sensational and it's ridiculous. It's horrible, obviously. But it doesn't mean it hasn't happened throughout much of American history. I mean, imagine what it was like to be an African American before the Civil Rights Movement. Before, shoot, I mean, just a free black in the North when slavery was still legal. I mean, imagine what they had to go through. You can't even compare it to today, but that legacy still continues, and I think it's one of those things we can't. Back to self-fulfilling prophecy. We keep getting stuck in this when we keep pointing out that look how different we are. Look how different. You know, that's the number one issue, I think, is that you have these. It's a social construct. Race is a social construct for starters. I mean, I made the video about this. This is one of my first videos I made on my YouTube channel. The video is called "How to End Racism." And it's one of the few videos I have that it brings in my opinion, kind of like this show. I usually don't bring in my opinion much, but the biggest driver or cause of racism, in my opinion, and at least recently, is the fact that there's so much emphasis on difference, based on skin color. Like the fact that people, when they meet somebody new, one of the first things they notice is skin color. Like you and I talking right now, if somebody were to watch this and hear us talking about Black Lives Matter, we're automatically discredited because we have lighter skin. Automatically. When race is not a real thing. Biologically, it's not a real thing. It's a social construct. It is something that we socially created, and it wasn't even invented until the explorers came over to the Americas for the most part. When the Spaniards and the Portuguese came over and they were trying to differentiate themselves from the Native Americans, and they said, well, they're a different race. They're clearly, they justified enslaving them.
Well, that's just playing with words. I mean, there are differences in appearance, demeanor, and a lot of that's your upbringing, but it's also kind of goes towards, you know, why do some groups mix together better than others? Because, I mean, if you want to get down to it, there's lots of differences. I mean, some even have different number of vertebrae, the material their skin is made out of, IQ. There's big differences.
Yeah, but there may be all these genetic differences. Like, for example,
point out the issue. I mean, I don't know. I grew up in Western Oklahoma, but I don't remember this crap when I was growing up. I mean, when I grew up, my friends, I had lots of Hispanic friends. You know, there weren't any African Americans in the community, but it seemed like this was never an issue, ever. And even my first 5 or 10 years out of college, this wasn't an issue. And I thought, hey, we've gotten there. And then we elect an African American president. And I was like, well, you know, it's over, it's done. And then boom,
it got worse. Since racial things have got worse.
It's literally done for a political agenda. I mean, that's the disgusting thing about all of this. They get more power by dividing us. We need more government. We need more protection. We need more police. We need more spending. We need, you know, radical left-wing liberals take more control of education through this. I mean, it really, truly is disgusting.
Yeah, I don't think it's a conspiracy.
We live in a country that
like a conspiracy, though.
An African American president twice. You could go back and look at the police shootings every single year, probably for the last 15 years. I guarantee you would notice the same pattern, same numbers. You know, 2 or 3 times as many whites are probably going to get shot and killed by the police. You're not going to hear about that. Yes, a disproportionate number of African Americans are going to be killed by police, but it's going to match the crime statistics and the number of officers killed by black criminals. I guarantee you could see the exact same pattern all the way through if someone would go and do this. And they're acting like, oh, this is some phenomenon. It's just what's going on here.
In that case, you
The
can't
way
really.
things are, and that's what needs to be addressed.
Well, I think we need to start by, I mean, what you said earlier about profiling. I mean, the reason why I don't like that so much is because when you're profiling, I mean, yeah, sure, that it can be handy.
They can't even do their job at the point that they're, oh, we're not willing to I mean, if I work for the Department of Homeland Security and I have 15 people working under me in the TSA or whatever, and there's 300 people going to get on this plane, what am I supposed to do? Because people, you know, they complain about the long lines and everything. And that's why, because they have to check. They have to check an 85-year-old white woman in a wheelchair who's trying to go, you know, in to get some medical care and tests run and stuff. And they're too busy shaking her down and sending her through the body scan or image and, you know, tapping down little 3 and 4-year-old children, shoving their hands down their pants. You know, then some woman walks through in a burqa, they're, oh, we can't touch her because, you know, well, that's their religion. That's, I'm, you know, male. Well, could we go get a female to go check her? I mean, that's ridiculous.
I just disagree on that. I think.
Well, what are they supposed
should be
to
random.
do? Check every single random?
No,
Then why
no.
even have them? Why even have them there? Random. Well,
They shouldn't have them there.
We have box
Robert, do you
cutters.
remember? Robert, do you remember before 9/11 when the
Yeah,
TSA didn't
that's
exist?
the world we live in now.
The world
That's
we
the
live
world
in.
we live in
The
now.
world we live in.
It's full of terrorist
Listen.
jihad guys that want to kill us. That's the world we live in
Okay.
now.
Okay, but the world we lived in before during the Cold War was probably a bit scarier. Could you agree with that?
No. There weren't
I
people
know-
getting mowed down in nice France prior to this mass migration that Europe decided, hey, we're going to be all inclusive. Let's just let in millions of people, and some of them want to kill us.
But there's
You know,
always
that
going to
wasn't
be
a problem.
there's always going to be people who want to kill other people in every society. You can't expect us to.
Well, let's just let in the
stop-
most radical
Oh.
group on the face of the earth. Let
They're letting
millions
that,
of
they're not. No,
Show
you're
me the mass
you're
rapes and
misconstruing
stuff
that.
taking place in Europe before they started doing this.
they're not just
Show me
letting.
the buildings blowing up and planes being hijacked. It wasn't going on.
They're not just letting the radicals, and you're making it sound like
Yes,
oh,
they are. They're not
Let's
even
all-
taking them. Have you seen the lines?
We're only
of just
letting radicals
hundreds of
in.
thousands of
Only the
people just
radicals in
marching
Syria.
in?
only the radicals in
Most
Syria
of
can come
them-
in. We don't want any
Most
moderates.
of them aren't even from Syria.
That's what you just made it sound like.
The
That it was
vast
only the
majority.
radicals. Like that's a ridiculous
You know what?
statement to
There
say.
you go.
Only the
Radicals
radicals
are going to get in.
that-
They're proving it.
radicals are getting in the United States,
Oh,
Robert. They're
because
everywhere.
we're letting them in.
Wait,
Because the barn door is open. Come on in. We realize we're at war with radical jihadists, and we're just going to let all these people in. And yes, some of you are going to be jihadists, but
See,
we'll
on
live
the
with
top
it
of
because
your-
we're so tolerant. We're so tolerant, we're just going to let you in.
at the top of your head, though, like let's take Germany, because Merkel gets all the attention here. Like, what percentage of the Syrians?
Montana.
What percentage of the Syrians would you say that were led into Germany are radicalized? Just off the top
They're
of your head,
most
you have to give a
not
number.
Syrians. They don't even know where most of these people really came from.
But answer the question, like, well, if you were to estimate how many of them are radicalized,
You can look at the
Interesting.
Pew polls, and I can tell you this. My definition of someone who's radical would be someone who supports beheadings, Sharia law. And the thing you forget about Sharia law is everyone has to abide by Sharia law, not just the Muslims in a community. Sharia law is enforced. Everyone, the dhimmi, have to abide by it too. Go look at the numbers of the Muslims in Europe who will openly tell you that they support Sharia law, that they openly support suicide bombings. When you're talking, there are groups in France, 42% have no problem with suicide bombings. They'll sit there and they'll tell people that. Oh, we're with the Pew, we're just, how many of you support suicide bombings? 42%. That's a problem.
well, what about
And if you
the
compare the world they came from and lived in to the world in Europe, like secular Europe, they would almost all by definition be radical.
I
have you seen
support a
the video
suicide
in
bombing
Norway?
sometimes. I
Have you
support a
seen-
suicide bombing.
Have you seen for religious reasons? Because
No, like
they
the best example. Okay, you've seen the movie Independence Day, right? The first one, not the stupid sequel. What?
no,
Oh, you haven't?
no.
Okay, in the movie
If you're
Independence
going to
Day.
use a movie where we have to go blow something up to save us from aliens to
Yeah,
try and
suicide
justify
bomb.
42% of young male Muslims in France
I'm just
supporting
saying.
killing me and you through suicide bombing because we're infidels. I mean, we really don't have much to say
I want to
to
see
one
that.
another at
I
that
want to see the
point.
poll because I feel like I'm
They're
missing
there.
something.
Look up Pew, look it up for anything. How many of them support Sharia law? How many of them support jihad? How many of them support basically the hijra, which is what's going on, which is how they've taken over 58 countries through migration. I mean, it's in their document. They say they're going to do this. You can see the videos where the imams are saying, we're going to go in, we're going to outbreed them, we're going to take them over, we're going to take their women. They literally say this.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
You've probably seen the video, and they're letting them in by the minute. They're not even vetting them.
Well, the good news is though,
They're not even vetting them. And if you can,
the good news
let's
is
see,
the kids are not clones of their parents. That's the greatest
they're
news
usually
here.
worse. The second generation is where most of these terrorists, the guys from Belgium,
Right, because
they're second generation because they feel alienated from their parents and the world they came from, and they grow up in Belgium and they feel, oh, I don't really fully fit in. Let me get back to my roots. And then these ISIS type recruiters go out there and find them and groom them and turn them into terrorists.
Yeah,
this is a real problem. I'm trying to dig through all of my junk mail and stuff here.
Let me show that picture again. You did see this ahead of time, and I'm going to show if the few viewers who are watching right now. But I saw this on Reddit the other day, and it's related to what we're talking about. It is a picture that somebody made where they looked at the literacy rate in the Middle East and Northern Africa, and it shows something that really surprised me. It's up there now. Okay, so literacy rate of the population 65 and older. So people living in Northern Africa, the Middle East, if you are age 65 and older, and if you look at that overwhelmingly, there seems to be the older you are, the less likely you know how to read. And then the map below has literacy rate of the population between 15 and 24, and most of the countries there, almost everybody can read. And when I saw this, I really had to do a double take. I was a little surprised. That's very dramatic. Would you say? I mean, like, what do you get from this?
If you trust their statistics, it is a very good sign. I have a hard time believing those numbers, though.
It's from
a lot
UNESCO.
of these places, they won't even allow females to learn to read.
I don't know. The evidence for that's a little shaky. I would argue. I mean, because they want them to be able to read the Quran.
Ask the girl in Afghanistan that got shot in the head for trying to go to school.
Oh, well, that's different, though. I mean, you're right. When we were talking about these maps before the podcast, you said that, well, sure, if they can read, that is promising, but what if they're just reading propaganda and they're just reading ISIS propaganda?
It boils down to what they're reading.
Right. We want them to read Western propaganda, right? Ours is the best propaganda.
Well, I would say our world is better to live in than theirs, and you can demonstrate that through the migration patterns as well.
Right.
What countries are people trying to get into versus what countries are they trying to leave?
Yeah, economics. I mean, you look at how rich the Western world is and how this is starting to change.
The main thing is we say how rich we are, but then we got 20 trillion in debt.
Well, but everybody has debt, so it all evens out.
Debt.
It's like that one.
These countries here, I would say, don't have that kind of debt. They don't even have the lovely social programs that we have.
Yeah, they don't even have much of a GDP to begin with. But no, I think I am more of an optimistic person, I think, than you are generally. I've noted. Would you say that? Would you say I'm more optimistic than you?
Blind's the word I would use, but yes, you are. You look at things optimistic.
Yeah, I got glasses.
One of your good.
So I generally believe that if you reading is the number one indicator for intelligence, I think, because if you can read well, then you can teach yourself anything, especially with the internet. And so I feel like,
I think the more you read, I think it helps develop.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but that's why I always tell my students, like, reading class is the most important class you want to try to get good grades in, and that's why I say you don't have to read what they tell you to read. Just read anything. Read a graphic novel. Read this magazine about video games. Please just read something this summer, And so, but the point is, the more intelligence you have, generally, you have more critical thinking. And the more critical thinking you have, generally, you have less of this nonsense that we've been talking about throughout most of this episode and most of our episodes about all these problems in the world. It's because when you have critical thinking, you have people that actually can look at things from other points of view. They can weigh options effectively. They can problem solve without having to just basically resort to emotions. And, I think that this is something that's promising, but you did make a point that you can't discount, and that is that propaganda is, as we saw in the Soviet Union, overwhelmingly effective. I mean, we saw it with fascist Italy. We saw it with Nazi Germany. Propaganda, it may not work so much with, many Americans anymore, but it does work in many places still in the world. So that is something I think ISIS has been pretty effective with propaganda. I mean,
yeah.
How do you respond
We're
to that?
Talking about a group with ISIS that we could wipe off the map in a week.
Yeah, they're small.
I mean, we could literally crush them like a fly if we wanted to, and we haven't. Which brings up the question, why?
Well,
follow the money trail. Who's making the money?
It's always a conspiracy with you.
No, it's literally what's going on. I mean, you want to have the real conversation about safety around the world. You want to get there. If we, the Western powers, would stop selling weapons to these nutcases.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that amazing that happens?
That's not a conspiracy. I mean, that's what's going on. I try to figure out and think what's really going on. And it's like,
no,
why are we supplying both sides?
It is a conspiracy. It's a real
conspiracy. They would be conspiring.
Yeah, they are.
When you said it, I'm thinking, well, you're making it sound like I'm coming up with a conspiracy or something. No. It's literally us doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it when we were talking about ISIS a year ago. And we were like, okay, because we were laughing about it. It's like, okay, here's these jihadis in the back of a truck. They've captured Japanese journalists and executed them. And they're riding around in these Toyota pickup trucks. They've got Kalashnikovs talking about how they're going to go take over Russia. They're going to make war against Russia. And they've got Russian weapons. And they're talking about how they're going to come to Washington, D.C. and put their flag over the White House. And they're going to kill Americans, make war on America while they're filming it with an iPhone. It's like these desert rats could not come up with any of this stuff on their own.
Yeah.
And the world, the people that they hate, that's where they get all of their tools in order to try and kill us and make our lives miserable.
Because people are making money off of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's. But it's not like they're all working together.
I mean, it's not like it's a small group of people sending weapons to the Middle East. Let's send food. Let's go in and build some schools. Let's go in and try. But they don't want that in their world.
No, they want sovereignty like everybody else. They want to rule themselves.
They think Western civilization and culture and stuff's evil. You'll find a lot of that. Certainly not all of them, but
you and I agree on this, that Western imperialism over past several decades is a big reason why this is. I mean, it's not like
it's not just like the old, because the new imperialism's culture. I mean, it's Justin Bieber, it's our movies with tons of nudity and sex and our violence in the movies. It's Miley Cyrus. I mean, we export Miley Cyrus to Syria. Yeah, they should be traumatized. I mean, they should keep that to yourself, you know. I'm not just talking about her, but like the twerking and everything else.
But you can argue that type of stuff, though, has a net positive, right? Because our culture influences them. So maybe just like with the Soviet Union, many argue that the Soviet Union fell because American culture like seeped through, and that's what kind of promoted all these other American ideals.
And that communism eventually fails everywhere. Yeah. So I mean, the people are just so miserable. It just does not work.
I think that in North Korea, what they're doing with the balloons, trying to drop in, copies of the movie The Interview, and I think dropping in copies of propaganda that's if
you want to get North Koreans killed for having it and possessing it, that's a great idea. I mean, you know how dangerous it is to have that stuff. Like even if they found it in your yard, you never even saw it.
But they already
to the gulag with you.
But they're already
not just you, but the next four generations of your family.
Right. I mean, but what you're saying is like most of the country already.
That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole country's basically a camp, but trust me, I'd rather be sitting there going, oh yes, Kim Jong-un, you're the greatest, oh, we love you, and not be in the camp and sitting there in the labor camp busting the rocks. We talked about how they even force you to like have a kid just so that kid can be, they'll play matchmaker. Oh, here, you'll have to have a kid so that way they can torture the kid till they die, and they'll make that kid have a kid.
Oh yeah, it's pretty sick.
It's a 4-generation punishment.
Yeah,
so sometimes we think we're helping. I mean, you can go through our entire history of imperialism and see where to point to countless examples where we're like, oh, we're going to help them, and really we're not.
Well, unintended consequences is the middle name of American foreign policy, if there was a middle name. I mean, because that's all it is unintended. Like, look at Iraq is the perfect example. Iraq.
I like that. I'm going to write that down. American unintended consequence. No, it's foreign.
American
policy. Let's just go with foreign unintended consequences.
I've got this book here.
Policy.
Can you see that book there?
It's called Hillary, Unintended Consequences, Clinton.
It's called Overthrow by Stephen Kinzer. He's one of those. He's one of those crazy liberals. But anyway, it shows you how from Hawaii to Iraq, the past 110 years, all the United States has really done is just overthrow governments in other countries.
Let me play the not America. You saying the people in Hawaii aren't better off having all those fat tourists coming in, giving them money?
Oh yeah, look at the native people in Hawaii.
With that,
today.
It's like if we didn't do it, wasn't Britain or someone else going to do it?
That was.
We grab that to keep others from doing it.
Okay, Theodore Roosevelt. That's what he would have said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, why not benefit us instead of them? But yeah, I mean, you had to have the loss of culture and all of that. That was done for money and naval base and pineapples and.
Oh yeah, the Dole Company.
But I mean, just think about it all the way down the line. I mean. That's where my mind was going earlier when we were like unintended consequences. That's been the last 8 years of really. I mean, you go back to Bush, we could go 16 years. Would that put us in the right timeline, or Bill Clinton did a little bit?
I think what you mentioned about just taking out ISIS altogether. I think that's what a lot of people in Washington are afraid of.
What's going to replace it? What comes in after that?
There is always a vacuum. There is always. It's just like with gangs in Chicago. If the or any big city. Who am I kidding? Like a few miles away from where I'm at, there are. If you take down a couple gang leaders, then all of a sudden there's instability, chaos. You have a power vacuum, and there's people trying to fight for power, and the violence goes crazy. Things settle down after a while. There's more stability, and you have a few, or maybe one strong leader that kind of takes control. It's the same thing. I mean, these gangs are nothing but tiny, tiny countries. I mean, just like what we used to be as human beings for many thousands of years. Tribes. Yeah, we were tribes. That was and I think, but unintended consequences. You could also say that about
Reagan was definitely. I mean, my gosh, Afghanistan.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to make it more local here. Like, if you look at the unintended consequences of the drug war, we constantly bring that up. Like, and I think that is, we're trying to help the poorest people in society, but we ended up making the problem worse. And I think.
Yeah, I mean, almost any government program is like that.
I have.
You can make unbelievable arguments, about the welfare program and how it just destroys poor families and poor areas of the country.
Oh, definitely.
Drug wars, the same thing.
Yeah, you should see this on the screen now. I came across this when I was researching for this episode, and it shows 46.3% of inmates in prison are there for drug offenses. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how this single thing that means like almost half of everybody in prison is there for either using or selling drugs. And when you put one person in prison, it's really pretty naive to assume that you're just ruining the life of one person. You're generally ruining the lives of many people.
Many children they have.
Especially children. And so what happens is, say Billy Bob, who was selling marijuana, gets locked up for 30 years.
Yeah, I've seen those stories.
And then so his 3 kids grow up without a father, and they are disillusioned and they don't like the system because of they perceived injustice of what happened. And then they grow up even probably worse than in terms of getting in trouble with the law. Or say Billy Bob gets out early, right? He gets out maybe 15 years. Well, that's 15 years of being in prison. And he started out just some regular guy who sold weed on the side to make extra money because he was in poverty. And now he's a hardened criminal who's ready to probably commit bigger crimes because of those 15 years he spent in prison, which is not meant to rehabilitate. Prison is not there to rehabilitate and make these people better. It's made to punish them. Prisons are made to punish people, and most of them, especially the privatized ones, have an incentive to keep them there, to get them there. Drug offenses right there. I think that is the root of so many of our problems.
Well, it's more than that. It's not that he went in and learned how to up his game, which, by the way, I wouldn't go to people that were in jail and incarcerated to learn how to up my game because they obviously sucked at it because they're in jail. But I digress. It's the fact that the guy can't get a job when he gets out because, oh, you're a felon. Oh, you've been in prison.
Vote.
Oh, drug offenses. Yeah, I mean, at that point, I'm more worried just about getting by than I am voting. But, yeah, I can't get a job because I've got a criminal record. So what do I have to do to survive? Go right back to my own game. But I don't know if I've mentioned this before in our chats when the drug war thing came up. That 46%, that's a little misleading because I've seen interviews with like district attorneys and police officers, people like that, when this stuff's coming up. They're like, oh my gosh, why are we so? Because usually what they'll do is, you see this with the encounter, you get pulled over for something else. Oftentimes weapons charges and things like that. They'll come across, most of the time when you're caught with drugs and stuff, like if you're in your car, they're pulling you over for something else. But oftentimes it's a case they're building against someone, and they can, get you for resisting arrest, assault and battery, you know, having an unregistered weapon, being a felon with a weapon. There's like a whole list of things that they will have the person on. So like, you know, if we go at this, you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. So here's what we'll do. We got you on the drugs, because here they are. Now you plead, yes, I did that, no contest, or guilty. Now if you plead guilty, we'll throw out the gun charges. We'll throw out, you know, the resisting arrest and all of this kind of stuff. So that person gets put in the system and they say, oh, they're in here for drug offenses. You know, or maybe they did catch them on 4 or 5 different things. Well, what are they categorizing them as being in jail for? The drugs or something else? It's kind of like smoking. If you smoked and you died, oh, it was smoking. Well, if you died from a stroke, they're not going to put you in the stroke. Oh, well, they attribute it to smoking.
Yeah, but you kind of just helped my argument, because what you said is, well, it's just you didn't say it, but you imply that it's easier just to throw drug charges on them.
Oh,
they're trying to get something else. And so that's just further evidence to me that all the main purpose of the drug war is to just fill the prisons.
Let's put it this way. Drugs, you can look at that, even if 100% of what I said is true. You can say drugs are responsible, partly at least responsible for 46.3% of the people in prison.
Yeah.
That's a fair statement.
And that is, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is.
I think if Obama, he pardoned all drug-using offenders tomorrow, that would be the best thing he could possibly do to try to solve the crisis of blacks murdering blacks in the streets.
Problem is, all those people I just mentioned that are in prison that did other things would be clumped in there because they were just convicted for the drugs.
Well,
a lot of them are very dangerous people. A lot of them are very dangerous. Because I've had that thought before. It's like, why don't we just do that? And then I was like, oh my gosh, well.
Yeah, but think of all the dangerous. I know a lot of dangerous people that are not behind bars. So.
Yeah, that should make it feel even better, because, you know, if we've got more. I mean, what is like the population of Ohio that we have incarcerated? It's like the entire, you know, it's the equivalent of the entire population of the state of Colorado. But this country has. But have you ever seen that chart where they got state by state? And it's like, oh, then it says, like in Oklahoma, it says Hungary. It's like the state of Oklahoma has as many people in prison as the country, the government of Romania.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so you could say, you know, if there's no drug war, maybe half the people who are in prison aren't there. I mean, just think about the impact to the economy, or how many of these people could be working. How much are we not having to spend in taxes and enforcement and such?
Half of the world's prison population of about 9 million is held in the United States, China, or Russia. Prison rates in the United States are the world's highest at 724 people per 100,000. So we're the land of the free, but we're the most imprisoned country.
The land of the free, the home of the imprisoned. Yeah.
Yeah. And what does that say about our society?
It says that.
What does that say about trust in government or trust in the police? You know, that is it right there. That sums it up.
Well, as I've said, I mean, we've got some serious issues that we need to deal with, and I don't think the current approach is helping. I mean, I think it's making it worse.
Yeah. I kind of back to the big picture here of civil unrest and people going out into the streets and protesting and getting upset at government at all levels, local and national. I pulled this up, and you mentioned something earlier on Wikipedia. You know, Wikipedia sometimes is the best place to go, because there are people like you and I that are actually, you know, they're just big time dorks, but they're also insomniacs, and they constantly update statistics and facts on Wikipedia. And Wikipedia never gets the credit it deserves, in my opinion. I tell my students this because it's constantly being checked and double checked and triple checked. And if anything,
plus underneath it, there's a big old list of the resources. You know, they cite the resources. That's where the value is. You go down there and click those, and then those are legit resources.
Yeah, a lot of primary sources in there. But anyway,
I had that with my students before. They're like, hey, you know, the English teacher or whatever won't let us use it. Oh, we'll click on it and go there anyway. Read the summary. Okay, there's a good foundation. Now down here at the bottom, those are your sources. Click on those.
Exactly.
Don't put that you got it from Wikipedia. Put that you got it from, well, wherever you did.
Oh yeah. Well, hey,
there I see myself.
There we go.
There.
I tell, or I have students that say they'll put literally that the source was Google.
Yeah,
that's pretty embarrassing that I just said that. But yeah, okay. So if you go to Wikipedia and you type in list of incidents of civil unrest in the United States. So this is a history show. We need to bring more history into this. Is this a normal thing for there to be civil unrest, rioting? Well, of course it is. We're human beings, but it lays it all down very nicely. Starts out with 1783, the Pennsylvania Mutiny of 1783. Obviously, got Shays' Rebellion in there. You got the Whiskey Rebellion a few years later. In the 1800s, it's more spread out here. Generally, you don't have too many rebellions, revolt, what have you. A lot of them are related to slavery and the. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
This could be a lot like having a conversation with Cypher about America's wars.
Yes.
It's a very, 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 very incomplete list.
It is. Well, obviously, you can't have them all in here. But this is, there are undocumented things. These are just what we know. Obviously, there's probably some that we have. There's primary sources that haven't been examined enough that we haven't added here. But this is pretty comprehensive considering. I mean, I looked at other sites too. Nothing beats what Wikipedia has here. But most of what before the Civil War was dealt with, there's a lot of stuff that dealt with slavery, a lot of stuff that dealt with labor, a lot of stuff that dealt with immigrants, especially the Know Nothing movements there. And then post Civil War, it became, I think the Union stuff kind of picked up more, but you also had a lot of, racism riots, like the Los Angeles anti-Chinese riot. I mean, the Chinese Exclusion Act was a real thing. It was a law that was supported by the majority of politicians in this country. We can't forget that. The Chinese Exclusion Act said the Chinese should not be allowed, and then in this country. And then it also justified laws that discriminated against the Chinese, but I digress a little bit. Going down a little bit, though, 1877 was pretty crazy, but that was the same year where there was a lot of political tension in this country, a lot of division between, remember that was when Reconstruction ended and you had the Compromise of 1877 after the disputed election of 1876. But it really gets fascinating to me in the 20th century, and we have more comprehensive data here. Look at 1919. I just highlight it there. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I mean, that's Red Summer.
Yeah, you had the Red Scare.
Yeah.
You also had lots of race riots. And Cypher has a video about 1919, that specific year, how crazy it was. And I don't think you can really compare anything to 1919, especially not 2016. And this is just what we had documented. There were numerous more that, into 1920, when Woodrow Wilson was, I just did a video about this, so this is fresh in my memory, but Woodrow Wilson was, not doing much in 1920 because of a series of strokes, and his wife, Edith, was pretty much running everything. The Tulsa race riot that you know quite a bit about. And then things calmed down in the 20s. We got the 30s. There's a lot of union stuff again, related to the Depression as well. And then jump ahead to the 60s. You've got, you got quite a bit in the 60s. Civil rights movement, like I said at the beginning of the show, you had a lot of peaceful protests in the beginning, but it slowly, when they felt like their voices weren't being heard, it seems like things got more and more violent. People became more desperate for change, immediate change, and they weren't seeing it, so they went to the streets. 1967, the long hot summer of 1967, 159 race riots erupted. 1968 is another key year. I think it's one of the craziest years. It might be the craziest year in American history. There's 1968. I mean, talk about a scary time to be alive. I mean, we know people that remember this year very well. I mean, I think a lot of people just lose touch of how crazy it was during that time. You and I weren't alive during that time, but I've read a lot about it. But yeah, the late 60s into the 70s.
I've seen a lot of interviews with people who were alive during the 60s, you know, and they'll be asked, is this worse? They go, oh, no way. I mean, there's really not even a comparison to how crazy things were in the 1960s. I mean, what bothers me is that what we're seeing is getting worse, and the fact that we haven't got past this stuff.
Right. I mean, 1970 was Kent State. I mean, that was when literally college students were protesting, not doing anything too horribly wrong at all. They were just protesting. That's all they were doing. And the police opened fire on them. And I really, what if that happened today? Kent State. What if that happened today? Do you think, I just think everybody would be in the streets if that happened. I think these policemen would be, they wouldn't be they would be facing so much scrutiny. I mean, I wonder if there would be a riot that would just take care of them on the spot if that happened again today. I mean, I just don't imagine. Can you imagine Kent State happening today is what I'm asking you. I mean.
Well, I mean, let me get it straight first. I mean, you said they weren't really doing anything wrong. So this was not one of the universities where they like took control of campus buildings and like basically kidnapped the university president. So they weren't doing that kind of crazy stuff, right?
Well, I think they occupied public land and they refused to leave, but that was it. There was no kidnapping.
Yeah, I'm saying there were campuses where that kind of stuff was happening.
Yeah, I mean, most campuses had something going on during the height of the Vietnam War. This is what this was about.
Okay, so what does that say there? 55 pounds into the air. I see something.
You need glasses, son.
No, it's just blurry on the screen.
55 rounds into the air. Or 28 yards.
Now, does it say anything there about what the students were doing? Or?
Well, I just read government issued textbooks.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I mean,
the real question is, do you see National Guard doing? I mean, that's the crux of the entire thing. It's like, do I believe that U.S. troops would fire on American citizens? That's not because I mean you see police do it. In our past, I mean, you had the Baltimore riots where the Union Army did that, in 1861.
Yeah.
Kent State, it happened. And it's hard for me to believe that they would, but you study history and the answer is yes.
Yeah. We're not there yet, but I'm just saying, I mean, I don't think we're going to get to this point. I keep hearing people saying that, this is such a scary time to live in.
I guess the more important question is, if they're there at some place and they're fired upon by someone in the crowd, like you've seen the 2 police shootings. I mean, what do the police do in response? They go after the guy. They use the robot in Dallas, which that would be an interesting conversation, of how do you feel about them using basically a drone to kill an American citizen?
Yeah.
You see it, like I said, I mean, cops aren't even safe pumping gas anymore. And the police, they use force against citizens all the time. So in a sense, it's having, we live in a country where we have the police, we also have the National Guard. Now the National Guard will be used to enforce law, but we're not supposed to use the Army, the military. But technically the National Guard's part of the U.S. Armed Forces.
That's true. I mean, it's supposed to be.
They're not supposed to use the Army. There's some fancy Latin phrase for that I can't even really pronounce.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
It's in the Constitution, and it says they're not supposed to use the military against us.
Yeah, that's pretty important. But let's go back to the list briefly because I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you the '80s. Remember the '80s? We were alive in the '80s, and I want to ask you why the '70s things were crazy too. They settled down though. All of a sudden, the '80s. Look at this. Just three. Just three. And the '90s, pretty calm too. Obviously, the LA, the Rodney King riots. That was what I remember.
Yeah, I read up on that before because I thought we were going to get into that.
Yeah.
Because you had mentioned it in a phone call, and I was like, I don't exactly remember the specifics of what happened in that case, but I read up on it, and it was pretty eye-opening.
Can't we all just get along? That's what he said. And we're still having the same conversation, 24 years later. It seems like we're exactly where we were in 1992. Don't you agree? Like, have we made any progress since 1992?
Well, I mean, you look at the list there, though, and there wasn't a lot of them in the 90s. So you could say it's worse than it was in 1992. Because what happened there? One riot?
It was pretty big, though. It was across, it lasted several weeks. And
it's like they always do. They destroyed their own section of the city, which I've never understood.
But then, we could jump back to that. But then, I just want to show you the 21st century. The first decade's not too crazy either, but then look at the 2010s.
They have Elian Gonzalez affairs.
Yeah, that wasn't that big a deal. Yeah.
I mean, were the Cubans like tearing the city of Miami up? I don't remember it being that crazy.
They mentioned Occupy Wall Street on here, which that was interesting. I don't remember a whole lot of drama going down. I just
remember that was very annoying is what I remember about
Occupy disrupted. Wall Street. But yeah, things pick up this year, don't they? You got, and whoever compiled this, obviously, there's no, obviously there should be like a pyramid where you can rank the severity of each one of these, and certain ones stand way above other ones. But I just, when you see it all laid out like this, it gets you to start thinking.
I will say the Ferguson thing, it's 2014. That was an election year, but I think earlier I said 2012. It's 2014.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a congressional election year.
Well, thanks for correcting yourself there.
Yeah. But I know it didn't seem like that long ago when I said it. It was kind of, you're in that stream of thought and you're like, you just keep going on. It's definitely veering off in a disturbing direction because if you had that list up there, how many have we had in 2016? Do you still have that?
Oh, let me go back to it here. According to this, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
My gosh. There was one in 2015 and 2 in 2014. 2013 was like the perfect year. 2 in 2012. My gosh.
But local things happen that are not on here, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
But
this is big enough to warrant being on this list of national scale.
But the reason why we're even talking about this, we only talk about stuff on this show if it is a trend that we feel in the distant future, when we look back on this time, this is something that will make whatever history books look like,
So
this is a trend that we'll look back on like, yeah, that was something that,
it's like 1919 all over again. It's weird because you're like in the year 2116, will this even be a blip on their radar screen?
Yeah, because 1919 is a blip.
But what I would like to do is go back through that list and see if there's any patterns there, like what else was going on. I mean, we know with the 60s it was
mostly race, which
Vietnam War.
Well, yeah, and the Vietnam War. That was more late 60s, early 70s, especially after Nixon.
So I'm kind of curious what the links to like economic things would be, because that's a huge element to this.
True.
It helps drive it a lot more than you would think.
Well,
we were talking about those neighborhoods earlier where the crime and stuff is. I mean, are they poor neighborhoods because there's a lot of crime? Is there a lot of crime because it's poor? Is it, I mean, like, what's the deeper issue?
I think you look at the 50s, you look at the 20s, that's one thing that stood out to me in terms of those are 2 decades associated with economic prosperity in this country, and there's not very many going on there. I mean, when there's stability, when everybody's making money, it seems like there's less unrest, people are getting along more overall. But you look at recent economic, the Great Recession, 2007, or really 2008, into probably, I don't know, we're still trying to recover from it. But you see, but those, what I noticed from all the recent riots stem around really what's always in the news that we hear about in terms of it's Black Lives Matter, or it's people that are fed up with the elites, like Occupy Wall Street, which, I mean, I know that has died down. Occupy Wall Street's died down, but it's still manifesting.
Yeah, it's got to die down because they have to vote for Hillary Clinton, and they don't want to look like hypocrites.
Hey, a lot of people are refusing to vote for her. That are
good.
I mean, it's
So I mean, if that's your stand on it, you clearly should not vote for her.
Right. I mean, I know personally many Bernie supporters that are they're either voting for Jill Stein or they're voting for Gary Johnson. They're not voting for.
I'd like to see it.
Clinton. Well, but yeah, the political environment right now, that shows a lot too. I think there's a lot of overlap. We talked about, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we talked about the SJWs, the social justice warriors, who make a big deal out of things that really aren't that big a deal, but it's
like the
just
word
something.
manhole.
I have no idea what that means, but
manhole, the thing in the street, the
sewer. Yeah, the sewer, yeah.
That's a misogynistic, patriarchal word.
Okay, well, I need to go to my safe place after hearing that. So, thanks for the trigger. But that type of stuff. But there are legitimate issues, and I would say, again, I'm being positive. I'm not too worried about the direction of this country because I see, at least people are talking about things, like instead of just being distracted by the Kardashians or distracted by fantasy football.
Or Pokemon Go.
Well,
the adults are starting to have a conversation.
Yeah, Pokemon Go that's a whole other thing too. That's another distraction that at least people are going outside. But yeah, maybe they're playing Pokemon Go and they wander into a protest or like, oh, good, you're becoming a good citizen and also playing a game. But no, I think that even though a lot of the conversation is kind of poisonous, meaning it's uninformed and people are just yelling at each other, not making any critical points at all. They're just basically, I don't like you and because you're, name calling, that type of stuff. At the same time, you're seeing more passion on all sides of the political spectrum, and you're seeing more people that are just, they want to do something and they want to have more control over the direction of the world. Like they're not satisfied with the way things are to a point where they're at least going on the internet and trolling people. They're at least, because I didn't see this as much when I think back when I was in college, the early 2000s, and I would get passionate about certain issues, like the drug war or like like crony capitalism or stuff like that. And it seems like none of my friends really cared. A lot of people didn't care. but it seems like the more people do care now. Even if they're not informed, at least they care. Would you agree with that assumption?
Well, I think the key there is you could still escape that in the early 2000s if you wanted to. The internet wasn't what it is today. Now with the social media, the Facebook, just wall-to-wall coverage of everything, you can't escape it. So you're gonna be forced to confront it whether you want to or not. I mean, you can still, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, because I know people who are 100% clueless today still. You have to go out of your way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I can't even check my email without getting slapped in the face with news stories. And it's weird because, like, earlier today, I was going on my usual cycle and route through everything, and it's like there wasn't any news there. There wasn't anything new. And I started feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? There's nothing to read. There's nothing to watch.
That's good, though.
I'm addicted to that, like people are to these games and stuff.
Yeah, your stress level probably, maybe it went down,
For one morning.
But I think I have friends, they will they'll unfollow Facebook friends because their Facebook friend posts political posts.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I never understood that, because I'm just like, I love to hear different points of view and I love to talk about these things. But so many people, they like to stay in their bubble. They want to make sure their feed is exactly what they want to see. And it's pretty fascinating to me to see that, wow, you only want to see your echo chamber. That's amazing. But you're right. It's hard to keep that echo chamber, and I'm glad it's hard. If it, really, it's scary to think if that echo chamber could not be broken. Ooh.
There really needs to be more dialogue and less anger and resentment and frustration and rioting, and that's not the way to make progress.
What we're doing, and you and I disagree on some things, and honestly, I think we agree on a lot. But I like to challenge you because I like to challenge anyone who's so sure of themselves. Like that's one of my pet peeves. If somebody thinks they have everything figured out, which you're actually, most of the time you're pretty good about not being like that. But I would argue that most human beings think we got everything figured out. You don't need. I don't need to learn
anything else. Are surely like that.
Yeah. Well, that's a weird thing.
The level that we see in government, where they just will not listen to or work with the other side, will not accept anything, even if it's a solution, is appalling. They're literally like babies up there in Congress. And
well, look at who's the two top candidates for president.
Yeah, why do they have to be two of the most
Donald Trump?
Two of the most divisive figures ever. You have to go back to like Abraham Lincoln before you can find a candidate that this many Americans hated.
Well, but both of them.
Yeah,
both of them.
Case.
Yeah, it's like most people would rather see. What was that poll that said they'd rather see a meteor strike?
Very well.
I got to pull that up. The poll that said they'd rather see a meteor strike as opposed to seeing either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump.
Like strike us, or like just like the world, or
end. Oh, 13. Okay, here it is. Let me show the audience here. I got to make sure I get this on because this is hilarious.
Please tell me this is an Onion news article.
No, this is legit. This is legit. Poll: 13% prefer. Oh, I never misinformed. I don't know. Stop. Okay, 13% prefer meteor hitting Earth over Clinton and Trump. And this was conducted by Public Policy polling.
Don't meteors hit Earth like almost every single day? Like they need some definition on this.
No, giant meteor. There we go. Giant meteor.
Okay. I guess for meteorites, technically they burn up in the atmosphere, but they are meteors. Am I wrong? I mean, I could be.
Yeah, you're right.
I used to watch a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Back when things were more stable and sane.
Yeah, but
I had to go out there and get my mental stimulant through that.
well, and I'm glad you brought that up. We have just a few minutes left here, and I'd share with you, I don't think you read this because you couldn't open up your email or something, Mike, but that sounds really bad. But I'll show it to you now. This is something I read, I don't remember when I first read this. It was a while ago. It was an article that I just came across. The website, it's Science Meets Religion.
All I've seen to myself 3 times on the screen.
Oh, man.
Now I'm moving.
You should see it now. You see it?
I see myself
Oh, dang. Well,
3 times.
all right, let me try it again then. All right. So the article, I mean,
There it
obviously,
is.
yeah, it references a book by a guy named, he's a social scientist named Steven Pinker. And so I should have brought up, I don't even have this book, but have you heard of the book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined?
I've heard the saying many times.
Oh, yeah.
Must appeal to the better angels of our nature.
Yeah. The book inspired me to make the video I made, and I'll
See a
pull
lot
it
of
up here.
biblical verses.
The world is better than ever before, better than ever before. Let's see if it pops up in a Google search. It better. Oh, it better. Yeah. I made this video.
I've seen that video.
Yeah, I was. Oh,
Nice hat, by the way.
thank you. No, I was inspired to make this video because of Pinker. And I think this article is what first got me onto, but really I couldn't believe it when I first read it. It's like, because all you hear in the news is that things are getting worse, that violence is increasing, that everything is getting crazy. And the statistics just prove the opposite. And we continue to get smarter. We continue to get less violent. Like
Most of us. How about that? Most
collectively.
people are, yeah.
But
it's the ones that aren't that can do a tremendous amount of damage.
Oh, and he mentioned here, I love this because you'll get a kick out of this. He mentioned how Theodore Roosevelt excused the decimation of Native Americans as necessary to prevent the continent from becoming a, quote, game preserve for squalid savages. We all know how racist Woodrow Wilson was, who, his 14 points get idolized and all that, of like, oh, he was trying to get world peace and self-determination and all that. Well, I mean, he praised the Ku Klux Klan. He declared any hyphenated American, quote, carries a dagger that he is ready to plunge into the vitals of this republic. FDR, the Japanese internment camps. I mean, these are all people that are glorified in our history, and not that long ago. I mean, and then you look at, of course, the fact that the crime rate dramatically falling since the early 90s. And we've talked about that on this podcast before, about Freakonomics and all that. I don't want to get into that too much. But overall, how much better the world is getting, and we just forget. Because there's a chunk of the 20th century that was so horrific with the world wars and with genocide going on, we kind of we get caught up in with what we're seeing in the news, with that's constantly being fed to us without even having to do any work. And so that was the whole point of me bringing this up, is that we should be inspired by how well things are going, and we shouldn't be afraid. Fear is driving so much right now. Fear is the reason why so many problems are existing.
Fear is the thing that's dangerous. I mean, that's
exactly.
That's the
Like,
problem. And it seems like we're not allowed to have that peace and prosperity for very long, because someone's going to come along with an agenda, or someone's going to go. I mean, because we're talking about one man that funded the Occupy Wall Street. Well, that didn't work. Let's overthrow the overthrow the government in Ukraine. Oh, let's start a big massive migration crisis. Let's start Black Lives Matter. Let's cause and stir it and make all of this stuff happen.
Let's
it
divide.
Seems very contrived.
Yeah, you make a good point because I think there's a lot of people in these movements who are trying to do the right thing.
Because if we have
But
peace in Western, well, let's just bring in a whole incompatible culture, and then we'll have chaos, and then we can get more bigger government power and control. I mean, it seems to me like this is happening a lot.
yeah, I think a lot of the people mean well, though. It's the unintended consequences, though. They don't realize how bad it's going to get. I mean, it's not like they're trying to stir things up. I mean, I would argue that, yeah, there's a few that maybe
A lot of
like
people
it.
that follow along and go with it, yes, I'll agree. They see them as useful idiots. They're like, oh, well, we can take in 1 million. No, you cannot take in 1 million, refugees and have a peaceful, sane, stable country. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, most countries around the world wouldn't even think about doing that. I mean,
That's insanity.
yeah, I mean, but I think we're learning, and I don't assume that all these people. I know we we had a disagreement earlier about the refugees, about how many of them were radicalized and all that, and how
By
they.
our definition, almost every single one of them are radical. I mean, like by the host country and how things are in Germany, by their definition of normalcy, nearly every single one of these person could be called a radical, just because of the different belief system.
Yeah, radical's another word, just like terrorism, isn't it? Like that.
It's like
It's
I
all
tried to bring it
subjective.
up, but never got there. I mean, the video in Norway of the imam up there talking, and he's like, "Oh, you hear all of this talk about radical Islam, radical. You guys aren't radical Muslims, are you?" And every single person, of course, says no. And he's like, "Okay." Then he runs down a list of, do you consider, the punishment for theft of cutting off a hand, as is called for by, this, and then he cites the verse in scripture and whatever, and every single one of them raises their hand. And he just runs down a list of stuff that we consider radical and barbaric, but Muslims, in his definition, a mainstream Muslim, just a normal, regular Muslim, doesn't consider killing someone for killing a woman for committing adultery, doesn't consider that radical. They support it because
I like to think that their views are evolving now that they're exposed to different cultures. Maybe they're realizing that, oh, these people aren't so
For
bad.
some of them it will, but
Yeah.
by definition, you have to subscribe to every single word of the scripture.
Well, if you want to be a good, follower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at Christianity, how so many people are over the place with Christianity, and even within the Catholic Church, there's so many people that have different beliefs. Even.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is you're allowed to do that. I mean, Martin Luther, thank goodness, the guy came along, and for all the negative, bad things I could say about him, his break of that stranglehold. But Christianity's not a political system like Islam. It's a religion. It's kind of a philosophy. Once that stranglehold is, Western civilizations, it's a marriage of that and the Greco-Roman systems of law and influence, and it's got the Enlightenment, the Renaissance. Whereas Islam, it's a political system and a religion.
We've said it before many times, the Enlightenment hasn't really reached the religion as a whole. That's a big reason why. I mean, we have theocracies everywhere.
The religion itself, I mean, it's a weird way to put it, but it's much better defended against that.
Yeah, it's yeah. You could cherry pick the Quran, though. You could cherry pick the stuff where it talks about peace and.
In the first half of it, I mean, the people.
Yeah, the early stuff. Yeah.
The stuff before they went to Medina. I mean, the stuff in Mecca is beautiful. And then he went to Medina and did the whole. Then it turned into war, and the rest of it was written throughout war and conflict, and it's very obvious. I mean, the problem is anything that happens later, any new revelation that contradicts an earlier one overrides the earlier one.
Yes,
that's the rule.
Just like the Supreme Court.
What the New Testament does to the Old Testament,
Well, yeah, the New
Christianity,
Testament
but
is
that
much
book got more
nicer.
peaceful. It started out violent and got peaceful until the crazy ending. Boom. But
Well, it's false to assume that the
laugh, man. That was my joke about Revelations at
oh
the end.
oh Revelations, yeah.
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 So it starts out barbaric, but then gets peaceful, and Islam's kind of the reverse of that. It starts out peaceful and beautiful in Muhammad's cave, and then it turns into jihad.
But it's false to assume that Islam can't reform again, that it can't become back towards peaceful. You know, it can take the turn that Christianity did in the last few hundred years, right?
I said that the documents and it's more guarded against that because it encompasses everything. I mean, to be an ideal Muslim, you have to live up to the standards set by Muhammad. And his life was pretty violent.
But perceptions of what it means to be an ideal Muslim can be changed and interpreted differently.
Yeah,
and that it could evolve. So
there's your hope. It's just within the system. I mean, anyone that speaks out against it, they are putting their life at risk, not because of the religion itself, because of some people within the religion. Now, if they think you're an infidel, it's just, that's it. If they're one of those guys and they think you're an infidel, your life is seriously at risk. I mean,
those people have to go. They have to.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of people who claim to be journalists. I mean, you probably know who it is, but saw clips. It's like every single time there's one of these terrorist attacks, you know, they drag out the other religions and they kind of do this false equivalency. They're like, oh, well, you know, in the past, Christians did that. And it's like, no, we're talking about the world we live in today. I mean, what's going on today? If you have to get a time machine out to make your point, you have no point.
Says the history teacher.
Yeah, I mean, history is useful in understanding all this stuff in context, but it's not. It's like all those recent terrorist attacks. They did not happen during Christmas. No, they did not happen during Yom Kippur. Or, you know, drawing a mental blank, and it's kind of embarrassing here. Hanukkah, that's it. You know, it wasn't Hanukkah attacks, it was Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the world we live in today, it's one particular ideology that's driving this terrorist violence around the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every once in a while, some radical, you know, like there was one story where they let this guy out of prison, and he was a Hasidic Jew, and he went straight to the gay pride parade and stabbed someone. And it's like certain media outlets just went crazy because they could finally say, "Oh, there you are! You see, a Jew killed a gay man. See, everything we've been saying is true." And it's just like, it's not the same. It's nowhere close.
We're at 2 hours, so we probably better wrap it up here. But I definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even get into Turkey and what's going on in Europe, and
no, we didn't. I can't believe how fast that went. I wanted to share with you. I tweeted earlier before the show. Are we living in historically dangerous times? And this is the results. Can you see that?
59%. I can't believe you can get reactions out of. Of course, it doesn't say how many people voted.
Oh,
can you see?
No, yeah, it was 12 votes.
12 votes. Well, that's pretty impressive, actually, compared to anything I've ever put on Twitter.
But people that can't see this, 58% said yes, we are living in historically dangerous times. 17% said no. 25% said too early to tell. And
too early to tell. I mean, irregardless of how this works out 100 years from now, people will be studying the chaos.
Or it could be a blip, like you said. It could be a blip. I don't know.
It's still going to be historic.
Well, that's why we're talking about it. I tend to lean more towards the no, and I think you tend to lean more towards the yes, right? Or
well, no, I'm just saying there's kind of a fault with the question because it will be
thanks
historical, and there is danger.
Thanks for trashing my.
That, you know, I guarantee you people read it like you intended it. I mean, yeah. I just think my mind, the way a lot of people can't even stand having a conversation with me because I'm like this, and it's like, Maybe that's why my videos do so poorly. But I'm like, so I'm just looking at it thinking, well, I mean, there is danger. And yeah, I mean, people will be talking about our standoffs and what's going on with Russia and China and everything else later, irregardless. So it will be notable.
Well, on that note, I think we should probably
I
wrap
know how
it
you
up
meant
here.
it though, and
Yeah.
approaching it that. Yeah, I mean it. I think because I've been asked this question before. Are we in more danger now than we were in the Cold War and stuff like that? And I say yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, if you would have been living with it and how you would have felt in the Cold War, yeah, I would have probably been more scared of a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. Now, but the problem is hindsight's 2020. We know it didn't happen. But we're going there again. I mean, on the frontiers and stuff. I think that's what we need to talk about in the next episode is Russia, China, what's going on there, Turkey. Because I think Erdogan, or I've heard it pronounced Erdogan, which is how it's spelled. I hear people say Erdogan. I think it's probably pronounced Erdogan.
The Turkey
I think
president.
the dude might have faked a coup to get more power. I think the whole thing could have been faked.
Yeah, they begin with these conspiracy theories. No,
but
No,
it isn't always a conspiracy. I think the dude might have. The whole thing might have been a setup to
conspiracy
get more
theories
power.
sometimes happen. Conspiracies do happen all the
Get
time.
rid of the people in the military who have an excuse to clean house.
All right. I wish we had more time. So
for sure.
Again, you can contact us at contextpodcast@gmail.com. Please do, or even commenting on these videos. I've been getting a little bit of feedback there, so that's good too. And then subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Robert, where can everybody find your stuff? Promote your stuff.
Readingthroughhistory.com. You can go there, check out. Some videos are there, but lessons, our blog, links to our books, which are out there. Got an Andrew Jackson history brief. It's the newest one, so you can go check that out. And I did a run check on that. I went to Amazon. I typed in the American Revolution history brief, and it popped up first. You just have to be in the Kindle section of the store.
Oh, okay. All right. Sounds good. And anything else you want to promote there?
We've been pretty quiet on our front here lately, so.
Actually having a vacation or a break, or not really, but.
Well, it doesn't feel like it, that's for sure.
All right. Well, yeah, and my stuff is Mr. Beats Social Studies channel. If you're watching this right now, that's what you're watching it on. But if you're listening, that's where you can find me online. And just released the election of 1920 video today. So I'm trying to get through all the elections before election day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but
I don't see how you can possibly do that.
Oh, that's a dare. I'm going to do it. All right. So on that note, thanks for listening. This has been Context. Till next time.
Yeah.